The church was a vision of perfection. White roses lined every pew. Gold ribbons fluttered softly under the hum of ceiling fans. The choir had just finished singing this very moment, and every guest in the packed cathedral was on their feet, phones up, faces beaming. Cameras clicked like fireworks. This was the wedding of the year, and all eyes were on the bride. Grace stood at the far end of the aisle, her veil cascading down over her face like a waterfall of tulle. Her dress shimmered under the light, an ivory mermaid gown, hand-beaded, flown in from Paris. Her heart beat in her ears, not from nerves, but anticipation. She had waited 5 years for this day, loved him through layoffs, sickness, long nights of studying, and 2 family funerals. She had stayed. She had hoped. She had prayed. And now, she was finally walking toward forever. Her heels tapped softly on the marble floor as her father led her forward. At the altar stood Dammy, tall, poised, handsome in his tailored black tuxedo. His best man whispered something, and Dammy laughed, too quickly. Grace's smile faltered. Something in his face, something cold. She reached the altar. The priest welcomed everyone and began the ceremony. Dammy took her hand, but it was limp in his. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Then came the vows. Do you, Damilola Adeyemi, take Grace Onyeka to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and to cherish, in joy and in sorrow, in health and in pain, all the days of your life? Silence. Dammy didn't answer. The church buzzed with whispers. The priest repeated the question. Still silence. Then slowly, Dammy leaned toward the mic and said, I can't do this. Gasps erupted. One woman screamed. A wine glass shattered at the back of the room. Grace stood there frozen. The priest blinked in confusion. Her father gripped her hand. I'm sorry, Dammy muttered, stepping back. I tried. I really tried. Grace removed her veil slowly, revealing a face not twisted in heartbreak, but set in stone. She reached for the mic. The priest hesitated, but handed it over. Her voice was calm, strong. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her tones slicing through the chaos. Thank you all for coming. Today was meant to be a wedding, but let's call it what it really is. The church went quiet. She looked out at the crowd. This is my liberation ceremony. Mouths dropped. Cameras focused. Even Dammy stopped moving. Grace's eyes locked on his. Since we're being honest, shall I tell them why you're really walking away? The room went still as glass. Grace adjusted the mic because he knows I found out what he did last month. In Abuja, with his boss's wife. Collective gasp. Some people stood. The best man lowered his head. Grace smiled faintly. And you thought I'd fall apart? She asked, voice steady. She stepped forward, standing tall, radiating something new, something powerful. But the next words she spoke would shift the entire atmosphere of the church. I have something else to say, and after this, none of you will forget this day. For a moment, the air in the church didn't move. No one whispered. No one coughed. Even the children who had been fidgeting minutes before stood wide-eyed, sensing the shift. Grace looked like a statue carved from elegance and quiet rage. She held the mic with grace, but her eyes blazed with truth. I didn't find out from a blog or a rumor, she said clearly. I found out because she called me herself, his boss's wife. She thought I deserved to know the kind of man I was about to marry. Someone in the back row muttered, Jesus. Dammy looked like a man struck by lightning. He took a step forward, but Grace raised one hand, calm, commanding. Don't, she said, not with anger but with finality. You've said enough by saying nothing. She turned back to the audience, scanning the faces of her mother, her in-laws-to-be, her bridal train who stood frozen in their blush-pink gowns. Her maid of honor, Tolu, looked pale. You all came to celebrate love, Grace continued, and I'm grateful, because today, I finally loved myself enough to let go of someone who never really held me. Whispers turned into murmurs. Phones were still recording. The live stream hadn't stopped. She smiled, but not the polite kind. It was the smile of a woman who had just stepped out of a cage. I paid for half this wedding. I paid for the dress, the decor, the food. I wrote my own vows, she said softly. I spent years praying for a man who was only pretending to pray with me. She turned to the priest and gave a small nod of apology. Father, I respect this church. But if I'm not walking out of here as a wife, I'm at least walking out free. And then, she handed the microphone back, lifted her dress slightly, and stepped down from the altar. Someone in the second row stood. Then another. Then another. A ripple of clapping began, unsure at first, hesitant, then growing louder, fuller, until it became a standing ovation. The church shook with applause. Some guests wiped tears. Others stood stunned, hands over their mouths. But Grace didn't cry, not once. Outside the church, the sun shone mercilessly. She walked into the light, her steps slow but strong. Her cousin ran after her, clutching her purse. Grace, she said breathlessly. Where are you going? Grace smiled without looking back. To return the ring, and then maybe to start over. Her phone buzzed in her clutch bag. A message from an unknown number popped up. We need to talk. Please. You don't know everything. To Lou, her maid of honor. Grace stopped walking. To Lou? What didn't she know? She turned slowly toward the church, her face hardening again. Something wasn't finished yet. And this time, she wouldn't walk away until she knew the full truth. Grace sat in the back of her cousin's car. Her gown crumpled around her like abandoned dreams. The applause still echoed in her ears. Not for a wedding, but for her courage. But that message from Lou? It hit different. We need to talk. Please. You don't know everything. She stared at her phone. Her hands were steady, but her heart wasn't. Lou had been her best friend since NYSC. Her confidant, her ride or die. The one who knew everything about her relationship with Dammy. She was the one who told her Dammy was the one. And now she had secrets? She texted back one word. Where? Minutes later, they met in a quiet corner of the hotel where the wedding reception had been scheduled. The hall was still untouched. White flowers, golden tablecloths, champagne chilling in silver buckets. Grace walked in first, alone, unguarded. Lou arrived minutes later, in her satin gown, her makeup smudged, eyes red like she'd been crying. She clutched her clutch like it held her last drop of dignity. I didn't mean for it to happen, Lou began. Grace folded her arms. So it happened. Lou's face crumbled. It was one night, just one. Months ago. We were drunk, stupid, angry at you. He said you didn't understand him, that you were too obsessed with perfection. I was just weak. Grace didn't blink. Her voice came out low and clear. So while helping me plan my wedding, you were hiding that you slept with my fiancé. Lou broke down. I swear it was a mistake. I thought it was over, but then I found out his boss's wife, was also in the picture. That's why I told him to confess. That's why he panicked and walked away at the altar. Grace looked at her, not with hatred, but with something colder. Detachment. You were my sister, Lou. I know, she whispered. And I lost that. I know I lost that. Grace turned and walked to the center of the decorated hall. Her veil lay draped over a chair like a ghost. She picked it up gently and held it. Then she looked at her friend. No, Lou. I didn't lose today. You did. Outside, reporters had begun to gather. Word had spread. A wedding turned into a declaration. A runaway groom. A brave bride. The headlines were already writing themselves. As Grace stepped out of the hotel, a reporter pushed a mic toward her. Miss Grace, do you have a statement? She looked straight into the camera. Yes, she said. Today was never a wedding. It was a wake. Because something dead should never have been revived. The crowd gasped. The reporter blinked. Grace walked away. But that night, alone in her hotel room, she opened her laptop. She wasn't going to be quiet anymore. She opened a blank document, titled it, The Day I Chose Myself. And then the first comment popped up on her viral wedding video post. Grace, I know your story. Because I lived it too. It was from a stranger. Or was it? Her eyes narrowed. This was no longer just about Dammy. Someone else had been watching, and their truth might shake everything again. Grace scrolled through the flood of messages beneath the viral video. Millions of views, thousands of comments, all unfolding within hours. Most were supportive. You're a queen for how you handled that. The way she took the mic? Iconic. I wish I had your strength. But one comment stood out. Grace, I know your story, because I lived it too. At Phoenix _79 something about it gripped her. Not just the words, but the weight behind them. She clicked the username. The profile was sparse, no photo, just a single quote on the bio. Silence protects the guilty. I'm done protecting. No other posts. A cold shiver ran through her. Who was this? Out of instinct. She replied. I'm listening. Seconds turned to minutes. Then a message arrived in her inbox. What Dammy did to you, he's done before. Different woman. Same pattern. I couldn't stay silent when I saw your video. Meet me. A location followed. A quiet coffee shop in Ikoyi. Tomorrow. Noon. Grace stared at it for a long time. This wasn't about closure anymore. This was becoming asterisk bigger than her heartbreak. The next day she arrived early. She wore jeans, flats, and no makeup. Just herself, stripped of expectation. The cafe was small, tucked beside a bookstore. Nothing flashy. At 12:03 p.m., a woman walked in. Early 30s. Plain black dress. No jewelry. No smile. Her eyes locked with Grace's. You're Phoenix? Grace asked. The woman nodded. Real name's Amaka. I dated Dammy 5 years ago. Thought I was going to marry him. Until I found out he was seeing someone else, my boss. Grace's stomach dropped. This is a pattern for him, Amaka continued. He targets women who shine, women with dreams. Then he dims them slowly, makes them doubt themselves. She opened her bag and pulled out a file. Inside were screenshots, messages, emails, receipts, proof. He ghosted me the week before our introduction. Left me to explain to both families. But the worst part? He threatened me when I tried to speak out. Said no one would believe me. That I'd look bitter, jealous. Grace felt the air shift. This wasn't just scandal. It was systemic. How many others? She asked quietly. I know too, Amaka replied. Maybe more. One tried to take her own life. Another left the country. Grace felt something stir inside her. Not rage. Not even grief. Resolve. Dammy had spent years constructing a perfect image, hiding behind charm and expensive suits. But now, the mask was cracking. I want to help, Grace said. Amaka blinked. You don't have to. Grace leaned forward. Oh, I have to, because he thought I'd stay silent, just like the others. But he chose the wrong woman this time. They exchanged numbers. As Grace left the cafe, the wind brushed her cheek like a soft whisper from the universe. This wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about exposing. And Dammy was about to learn what happens when the women you break find each other. Because the next move wouldn't be made in silence. And it wouldn't be made alone. Grace hadn't touched a microphone since the wedding. But 3 weeks later, she found herself staring at one again. This time in front of a crowded hall at a women's leadership summit in Victoria Island. The organizers had reached out after her story went viral. We don't need a perfect speech, the coordinator had told her. We need a real one. Grace had almost said no. But something in Amaka's voice, the quiet pain behind her words lingered with her. And then there were the other messages. More women, more stories. Different names. Same betrayal. So Grace had written her speech on a crumpled notepad at 3 a.m. with tears in her eyes and fire in her chest. Now, standing under the soft stage lights, she looked out at the sea of faces. Young women, older women, journalists, advocates, survivors, all waiting. She took a breath. When he said, I can't do this, he thought I would break. She began, her voice steady. But what he didn't realize is that he didn't just free himself. He freed me. A hush fell over the room. Grace walked across the stage, not reading from notes, just speaking from somewhere deeper. Some of us are taught to suffer quietly. We're told to endure, to keep the family name clean, to forgive men who never even said sorry. Soft nods rippled through the crowd. But I'm here to say, silence isn't grace. Endurance isn't love. And loyalty should never cost you yourself. Someone clapped. Then another. Soon, the hall echoed with applause. Grace paused, her heart swelling. Not from pride, but from truth. I wasn't left at the altar. I was liberated at the altar. The applause grew louder. Afterward, women lined up just to hug her, to share. One handed her a note with shaking hands. Asterisk. He beat me for 10 years. Today I told my mother. Thank you. Asterisk. Backstage, as Grace sat quietly sipping water, her phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line. I have a story too. It was from a woman named Zena, Dammy's ex from university. A name he'd once mentioned only briefly, calling her unstable. Grace opened the email. It was raw, painful. Zena had gotten pregnant during NYSC. Dammy had begged her to terminate, promising they'd try again after marriage. She'd agreed. He ghosted her 2 weeks later. Grace read each line slowly, her throat tight. Zena ended with, he ruined a part of me, but seeing you, I think I'm ready to speak. Grace looked up at the ceiling, tears brimming. She hadn't asked for this platform. But maybe the mic had found her again because it knew her voice wasn't just hers anymore. She texted Amaka, we're not done. And she meant it. There was a bigger stage waiting. A bigger storm coming. And this time, he wouldn't be the one holding the mic. 2 weeks after the summit, Grace launched a platform called No Bride Left Behind. What started as a WhatsApp group for sharing survival stories grew into a full online community. She didn't plan for it to explode, but it did. By the end of the first week, over 3,000 women had joined. From across Nigeria, from across Africa. Some were young brides. Others were mothers, even grandmothers. All with one thing in common. Silence they had carried like a second skin. And now Grace was helping them shed it. She hosted weekly live streams. Not professional. Just her phone and truth. I'm not a therapist, she would always say. But I'm someone who made it out. They listened, not because she had all the answers, but because she wasn't pretending anymore. One Friday evening, she got a call from an unfamiliar number. Grace? A deep voice asked. Yes. This is Pastor Femi Oladikan. I'm calling on behalf of Dammy's church, she finished coldly. A pause. Then, yes. She almost ended the call. But curiosity made her stay. We saw the video, the speech, and the movement. It's commendable. Commendable. That word sat heavy in her ear like dust. But we're asking if you'd consider moderating your tone. Dammy's family is under pressure. The elders are worried the scandal may affect church attendance. Grace let out a quiet, dry laugh. You're calling me about attendance? We're asking for peace, Sister Grace. She took a breath. Peace isn't silence, Pastor. And truth doesn't shrink for comfort. She ended the call before he could reply. Later that night, she tweeted about it. They called it a scandal. I call it survival. If the truth is bad for business, maybe your business was never holy. It went viral. Again. But while thousands praised her, there were others who weren't clapping. Dammy's cousin posted a video, trying to shame her. She's chasing clout. No real woman would destroy a man like this. She's bitter, not brave. The comments section turned into a war zone. Grace didn't reply. She didn't need to, because something bigger happened that week. Zena, Dammy's ex, posted her own video. Nervous, unpolished, but honest. She told the story of how he made her feel worthless. How his family paid her to disappear. How she almost did. But Grace's story made me remember who I was before him, she said, voice trembling. So I'm not hiding anymore. The internet erupted. Support poured in. Suddenly, Dammy was trending. But not the way he liked. Brand deals were pulled. His podcast sponsor paused funding. His Instagram comments became a mess of fire emojis and broken heart reactions. For the first time, he was the one people were questioning. One night, Grace got a message. No name. Just one line. You don't know the full story. You should talk to his ex-fiancée from London. Grace blinked. London? There was another woman? Before she could ask who sent it, the message disappeared. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. She had opened a door. And now, ghosts she didn't know existed were walking through. Grace couldn't sleep. The message kept echoing. You should talk to his ex-fiancée from London. She didn't even know there had been one. Dami had mentioned studying in London briefly, but always dodged the topic when it came to past relationships. She never pushed. She thought it was respect. Now she knew better. She messaged a friend who lived in the UK, someone who once mentioned knowing Dami during his university days. The reply came an hour later. Her name was Amira Bello, Nigerian-British. They were engaged. It ended badly. Grace searched the name. Photos surfaced. A woman with almond eyes, caramel skin, and a quiet elegance. There were old Facebook pictures, her and Dami at a waterfall, another of her wearing an engagement ring. Dated 5 years ago. The captions were gone. But the pain in the eyes wasn't. Grace hesitated, then sent her a DM. Hi Amira. I know we've never met, but I think we have something in common. I'm reaching out because I believe your story might help others too. I understand if you don't want to talk, but I'd be grateful if you did. She didn't expect a reply, but 2 days later it came. I saw what you did at the altar. I never thought I'd see someone stand up to him. I'm ready to talk. They scheduled a video call. When the screen blinked on, Amira looked calm, composed, but her voice wavered slightly when she spoke. Dami was charming at first, smart, gentle. Then slowly, he started changing. She described isolation, emotional manipulation, how he'd gaslight her into doubting her own memory. He proposed, but only after I threatened to leave. Then came the worst part. Grace held her breath. One night we argued. I found out he cheated. He got angry, tried to grab my phone. I fought back. He shoved me hard. I hit my head on the counter. There was a scar just above Amira's right temple. Grace had noticed it but hadn't thought much of it. I told his family. They blamed me, said I provoked him, said I needed prayer. Amira paused, her lips trembling. I didn't press charges. I was ashamed. I moved cities, changed numbers, but I watched him online. I saw how he rebranded as this clean-cut relationship coach. It made me sick. Grace swallowed hard. This wasn't just about a broken engagement. It was a pattern, a cycle, and she had almost become the next chapter. Amira leaned forward. You saved yourself, Grace. But what if we could save others too? A silence passed between them. Then Grace nodded. Yes, she said. Let's do it. That night, they recorded a video together. 2 women, 1 truth. It wasn't dramatic, just clear. Amira spoke first, then Grace. They posted it online with the caption, "We're not his victims. We're each other's voices." The reaction was instant. Millions of views, thousands of messages, a ripple that turned into a wave. But not everyone was watching from a distance. That same night, as Grace locked up her office, she noticed a black car parked across the street, engine on, headlights off. She stared at it. It didn't move. She walked faster. Behind her, a door slammed, and a voice she hadn't heard in weeks called out. Grace. She froze. It was Dami. Grace turned slowly. Dami stood in the shadow of the car, half lit by a street lamp. No velvet suit this time, just a dark hoodie, jeans, and eyes that held too much silence. I just want to talk, he said. Grace didn't move. Her keys were still in her hand, gripped tight between her fingers. You've said enough, she replied. He took a slow step forward. You've ruined me. She raised an eyebrow. You ruined yourself. He flinched, but not from her words, more like they confirmed something he already feared. I lost everything, he whispered. The business is frozen. Clients are gone. My family, he stopped himself. You couldn't just walk away, could you? Grace stepped forward now, her voice calm, clear. You humiliated me in front of hundreds, lied to me for years, and still I would have walked away in peace. But you wanted to play victim, pretend to be the man you never were. That's why this is happening. He stared at her, his jaw tight. Why do you hate me so much? He asked quietly. Grace blinked. I don't. That seemed to throw him off. I don't hate you, Dammy. That would mean you still have power over me. She exhaled. I've just stopped protecting you. He looked away, his face twisting, something between shame and grief. You were the first person who really saw me, he muttered. I thought if I could keep you, I'd be good. Grace's voice softened, but it didn't shake. No one can be your redemption project, Dammy. We're not mirrors. We're people. Silence stretched between them. Then she stepped back. Whatever this is, ends here. Don't follow me again. Don't call me. Don't show up. Next time, I'll involve the law. She turned and walked away. This time, she didn't look back. 2 months later, Grace stood on a brightly lit stage, wearing a sleek white suit. Her TED Talk was being streamed live. The title behind her read, When the Altar Becomes a Battlefield, Choosing Yourself. She began with a smile. I was left at the altar, and I'm grateful for it. Laughter broke out in the audience, but it was kind, warm. I didn't lose love that day. I found truth. And I learned that sometimes the worst moments in your life aren't the end. They're the door to something new. Applause. Grace spoke for 20 minutes about strength, boundaries, survival, and the danger of protecting broken men at the cost of whole women. When she ended, the room stood up. A standing ovation. That night, back in her apartment, she sat by the window, a cup of tea in hand. The city lights blinked like quiet stars below. She looked at her reflection in the glass. Not as a woman scorned, not as a bride abandoned, but as someone reborn. Her phone buzzed. It was Amira. Did you see the news? Another girl just came forward. Same story. We're making a difference. Grace replied, one truth at a time. She leaned back, smiling. Her altar wasn't a grave. It was a stage, and she had finally learned to take the mic. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. We hope to see you in our next video.